gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the main event.
Welcome to Radar Cop Podcast. I'm your host, Al Martinez, also known as Alpha Mike. You are listening to episode 334, Why Pay Income Tax? Now, you're probably wondering, where did this come from? I thought we were going to talk about guns in the month of February, and you would be right. But we have a little bit of an update. We're going to do these short little podcasts. And why? Because the 47th President of the United States is on fire. And we need to keep up with some of the things that he's doing. And I want to pass on that information. You'll hear the other podcasts that were scheduled, such as First Shots with M&amp. That will be episode 335, which will play later on in the week. So we haven't forgot, we're just adding content, not taking it away. We live in times that we've got to move a lot faster. Things are happening. Corruption and investigations and a lot of the sinister plots that have been going on in the United States are being uncovered. And that's going to affect a lot of Americans, and we need to be on it. We'll do a lot of these short videos as well with Second Amendment issues. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, why pay income tax? Since the founding of our nation, all the way up to 1895, income tax was not paid. The way the United States would generate funding was through tariffs. You know what the 47th President of the United States is doing now. Tariff, tariff, tariff. And there was a little bit of a problem when our Congress wanted to invoke taxes. You see, taxes were a state thing, not necessarily a federal government thing. Through the tariffs, imports that were coming into the country, they would finance the military, the defense, as stated such in the Constitution. But somehow in 1895, our Congress started to become greedy, saying, well, we can do what the state does. But this method of taxation that they wanted to do in 1895 was challenged. And it would become a Supreme Court matter in Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company. It would be heard or argued March 7th of 1895. Boy, that's a long time ago. And finally decided on April 8th, 1895. Basically, the argument was that the states could charge an income tax, but not the federal government. The question placed before the Supreme Court at that time was the income tax a direct tax in violation of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9. The court held that the act violated the Constitution since it imposed taxes on personal income deriving from real estate investment and personal property such as stocks and bonds. That was a direct taxation scheme. That's a strong word, not appropriated properly among the states. The decision was negated to adopt the adoption of the 16th Amendment in 19 1913. So as a result, the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do it. Taxation is a state thing. The Congress invoked the 16th Amendment in 1913. At the time in the Supreme Court, one of the justices, Justice Brown, wrote, the decision involves nothing less than the surrender of the taxing power to the moneyed class. Was not favored by the Supreme Court, but the reach around from our government and our Congress was pretty simple. We would just come up with an amendment, and they did. But in a lot of this ruling, the argument was, how would the federal government receive taxation or a surplus of money? Most of the money that they were receiving was through these tariffs to supply the military. But they knew that they could get more money if they invoked a federal income tax. And one of the things that the Supreme Court in that time bounced around was the defense of the nation and the role of the federal government versus the role of the states. So pretty much, we would invoke a new amendment, and that would bring taxation at the federal level. And guess what we would do? We would increase the amount of wars we would get into. So in Pollock versus Farmer in 1895, Supreme Court said, no, you not so fast. You can't invoke an income tax. Only the states can come up with taxation. And they bounced it around. They discussed the military and the tariff situation. And they said in times of emergency, maybe. In other words, to pay for a war, let's say. Well, our Congress quickly invoked the 16th Amendment in 1913, and federal income tax was born. What would have happened after 1613? Well, we would get involved in World War I. If we go back in time, remember, this lawsuit is, this case goes before the Supreme Court in 1895. We fight our war in 1898, the Spanish-American War. Then in 1913, they invoked the amendment. We get into another war, the First World War from 1917 to 1918. Then we get involved in the Second World War, 1941 to 1945. Korean War, 1950 to 1953. Vietnam War, 1964-1975. Desert Shield, 1990 to 1991. And the Global War on Terror, October 2001 to September 2021. And we get involved in all these wars with one purpose, and one purpose only. The federal income tax that we're all paying is paying for the wars. It is an excuse that Congress continuously has in creating wars and having perpetual wars for Americans. As we see more and more fraud being uncovered, as we see more and more plots of money just being wasted, billions and trillions of dollars pissed away by our government. What I just told you today about our income taxation is the beginning of this corruption. Supreme Court said no. Congress said yes, passed a law, created the wars, and they've been doing it ever since. Could it be that the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, which has actively said prior to 1913, citizens weren't paying taxes. Tariffs were picking up the bill. They were paying taxes at state level, but not necessarily at the federal level. Today, everybody's getting hammered at the federal level with 80,000 plus new IRS agents that were going to investigate us all, but now they're going to Homeland Security and the border. Thank God. As a result, what we are seeing is more and more sickening. Keep in mind, all these wars that we get into, remember what the Supreme Court said in Pollock versus Farmers? It basically said, like in times of emergency in a war, and we have to pay for that war. Well, if we're always in perpetual wars, we'll never get out of them. And income tax will never go away. So it could be that the 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is trying to go back prior to 1913 when citizens didn't pay taxes. Tariffs did. Think it's far-fetched? Put on your seatbelt. We're going for that ride. Would be the greatest moment in American history as we discover all this fraud, correct the wrong, and do away with taxes. If you're looking for gun training in the Tampa Bay area, look no more. Raider Cop TAC, TAC. That's Raider Cop TAC, TAC.com. We can provide you with that training, whether it's intermediate or beginner or advanced firearms training. Give us a call at 813-942-7400. And if you want to hear all our podcasts from number 1 to number 334, just tune into RaiderCop.com. RaiderCop.com. Want to send us a nasty email like most people do? RaiderCop Podcast, all one word, at proton, PROTON.me, M-E. Now, let's conclude this short but powerful podcast with opening up our Bibles and looking at Mark chapter 16, verse 15. And it says, "And he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature." This is Alpha Mike. I'll see you downrange.
Just 1322.